Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. Whenever the government meddles or just gets involved when it's uninvited and shouldn't even be there in the first place in the economy, there's always these knock-on effects. Consequences, which can sometimes be entirely predicted, that can cause massive problems later on. So take the mortgage crisis, for instance, in 2008, when the entire financial system in America seized up, causing the Great Recession and the worldwide collapse in the financial system. How did that crisis happen? I mean, well, we all know it happened because the government got involved in the homeownership business, because the government decided that it was the American dream to own a home, and they wanted to help make it possible for as many people as they could. It sounds like they had the best of intentions, right? But they got involved by telling Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, two of these governmental agencies that are completely unaccountable, backstopped, by the way, by American taxpayers, to extend loan guarantees to big private banks like Washington Mutual and Countrywide and many of these others. And these loan guarantees were promises that these banks to the American taxpayer, that the taxpayers would backstop any mortgage loans that these big banks wanted to make. So this interference from the government in the mortgage market, and also redefining a lot of criteria and terms, created this huge bubble, which caused the real estate market, to rocket to the moon, because private banks like Washington Mutual, they were making loans to anyone who wanted them. And because the federal government was also trying to control and redefine what criteria they could use, they didn't even need to see your income. You could just simply state your income, which means you could make it up if you wanted to. So during this time, the banks would give you a mortgage loan even if you could not provide any proof of your residency in the United States, that you were a legal citizen, that you had ways that you could be held accountable to pay back the terms of this loan. This all factored into creating one big giant housing bubble. So why would banks loan hundreds of billions of dollars to people that perhaps could not get that type of loan for that type of home? Because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they told private banks that American taxpayers, we will guarantee your loans, except we never were asked about it. And if those mortgage loans go bad, the government can just always step in and bail those big banks out with their pretend money, or they'll just go to us, the taxpayer, and shake us out for more. That was what was called too big to fail. And when you tell a private institution that the American taxpayers are going to bail them out, that private institution is then going to take completely unadvisable risks, like making loans way over what some people could make with their actual income, or making loans to people who couldn't pay back the bank at all, which is exactly what happened in many cases. After all, the American taxpayer had the private banks back if anything went wrong. And when that happens, I mean, that's when the real estate market went down as it did in 2008. You get a catastrophe. So suddenly people simply walked away from their homes, upside down on their mortgages, behind in their payments, and there were billions of dollars that were failed to pay back to the banks. They just didn't meet the terms of their loan agreement. Washington Mutual and Countrywide went bankrupt. They lost billions of dollars. Millions of Americans lost their homes. And so we entered from that point into the Great Recession. We added trillions of dollars in debt to our balance sheet. And we all of us taxpayers, we paid for the whole thing. And all of this happened because the government decided to get involved in the economy. So our government learned nothing, absolutely nothing from 2008, because the same kind of self-induced crisis. By the way, this is all playing out again with some of the exact same people who were in office in 2008, except this time the self-induced crisis was actually caused by the reaction to the pandemic, the government's reaction to the pandemic. See, America could have, just like Florida or Texas or even Sweden, simply protected vulnerable classes from the coronavirus while at the same time leaving their economies open. So leave it to businesses and adults to make their personal health decisions, right, based on their own personal health situations, but just not go in and try to shut down businesses with some weird draconian one-size-fits-all government restriction. Now, had America done that, like Florida and Texas and even Sweden, you could have both protected the vulnerable people's health, but you could also kept the economy from getting sick, so to speak. But now the American economy is unwell, and it's entirely self-induced. Case in point, this eviction moratorium, which ended on July 31st. There are currently 11.4 million people who are behind on their rent. And many they got kind of used to not used, but they just sort of were told by the government, don't worry, we've got your back. We'll handle it. We're going to pay it for you. And that was because, by the way, the federal government enacted what is essentially eminent domain on our ability to engage in commerce and generate income. See, before the pandemic, we all understood. You get up, you go to work, you do the 9-to-5 grind, and then the government came in and changed all that. You know, really, some days we do love our jobs and some days we don't, but everybody had bills to pay. Everyone was adult. Everyone wanted to pay their mortgage. Everyone wanted to pay their rent. Working is what Americans do. It builds your personal wealth. It opens up possibilities, blah, blah, blah. We're all adults. We understand what this is. But working is also incredibly good for the economy. And it's good for other people who need goods or services that we provide. And frankly, working's good for you, being productive, blah, blah, blah. I want to talk about the government because you don't want to sit around and collect a government check. And so we worked, we paid our mortgages, people paid their rents, that's how it works. And so this sweat equity, it's paid basically by all Americans. All of this, everybody contributing makes the country great. And then in the last 18 months, the government demanded we do something stupid. The government said, stop working. And the government, they said, we're going to shut down all of your ability to engage in commerce. We're going to shut down your ability to generate an income. And then landlords were told by the federal government that there would be no evictions. And it was all blamed on the pandemic, as we all know. And so millions of people, they had to stop working. The government shut everything down. It didn't matter. And by the way, those who did try to open their businesses and generate an income were arrested or fined. So now you have people who are told that you cannot be evicted. Landlords, you cannot evict these people. And they were the government was sending out checks to a lot of people in the country, right? It was, it seemed like it was kind of maybe a logical trade-off at the beginning of the pandemic, because most of us knew that the government would train people to rely upon this federal assistance from this government-created problem until it was advantageous for the government to stop, at which point then they would hope that maybe you would join them in blaming Republicans for all of it. Because that's usually how it goes, right? So as a result of growing dependence on the government, born of this policy, there are now consequences we are all dealing with. One of those consequences is that people got used to not going in to the 9-to-5 grind. After all, the government pays you more than your 9-to-5 grind, then why work, right? Here's a breakdown of all of the benefits one might receive from the government during this pandemic. You have your regular state unemployment insurance. You get a little over $1,000 a month, $300 weekly unemployment bonus. That amounts to about $1,300 per month. Food stamps, $365 a month. Child tax credits could get you about $600 a month. Earned income tax credit of $426 per month. All of this totaling about $3,694 of income from the government per month. You just open up the mailbox and you get paid. All done in the name of helping people, of course. But we didn't actually help people. We made it harder for our economy to recover, an economy that we should not have shut down in the first place. The government closing the largest economy in the world has had serious consequences. One of those is we are now dealing with a labor shortage. And the labor shortage is so bad, it's caused one McDonald's to offer $50 to people just to interview for the job. $50 if you never flipped all one beef patty. Is that McDonald's or Burger King? All one beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese. I have no idea how I know this. By the way, this labor shortage now causing a supply shortage in lumber, rental cars, chicken wings, diapers, pool chemicals, chlorine. I mean, you name it, there's a shortage. So what happens when there are shortages? Well, a couple things. You wait a long time to get your item or service, and then you pay more for it. Scarcity drives up costs. So now we have inflation. But there's a bigger problem on top of all of these issues. Now the eviction moratorium put in place by the U.S. government is expired, meaning millions of people behind on their rents now have to pay up or face eviction. The gravy train has ended when in fact it never should have started. Remember those evil landlords, the ones no one feels bad for? Many are just middle-class folks themselves, who maybe they own a rental or two. Well, now they've gotten hosed. The government served them a bill for the government's errant actions, and there's been no landlord bailout program, no moratorium on mortgages, no moratorium on property taxes, no moratorium on income taxes. Did you all have to pay the exact amount of tax that you did the year before, and the year before that, you did? See, the Democrats are not worried about any of those people. And if they actually cared for any person, but regardless of landlord or renter, they would have included all of this in their proposals instead of exclusively focusing on renters alone. Those landlords still owe the big bank on their mortgages, even as their tenants stop paying them rent. This is a great way to destroy the middle class, a group of our government apparently doesn't care about. And Nancy Pelosi, who's worth $100 million plus, certainly doesn't care about the middle class. Here's her tweet about trying to extend the eviction moratorium via the CDC. She says, and I quote, "The CDC has the power to extend the eviction moratorium. As they double down on masks, why wouldn't they extend the moratorium in light of the Delta variant? It is a moral imperative to keep people from being put out in the street, which also contributes to the public health emergency. The virus is still a threat. The moratorium must be extended, and the funds Congress allocated to assist renters and landlords must be spent," end quote. By the way, all of the money, the billions and billions of dollars that were allocated for this, only $3 billion was spent, which seems, only in DC does that not seem like a lot of money, but I guarantee you that was only a tiny percentage of what was actually allocated for this. So where's the money going? Maybe, is it to pay TikTok influencers to tell people to go get the jab? No, this whole thing from Pelosi and Democrats, it's pretend to care theater. That's all it is. It's in the name of helping people, right? That's what they say. But in that name, the government has created a permanent dependent class, people who are paid more to stay home and wait for the check for the government. Meanwhile, the absence of these people in the workplace is causing a labor shortage, supply shortages, and inflation now, which makes everything more expensive for everyone, including the folks about to be evicted. There is nothing to learn from this. It was done on purpose. Nancy Pelosi and Democrats want more government intervention in the economy, and Democrats already believe that they own your money. That's why they view tax cuts as a cost to them. They want to extend the eviction moratorium, and through this extension, they want to extend their authority over your property rights. How very Marxist. Pelosi knows that she can't control Biden and SCOTUS into doing this, so now the administration is heavily leaning on state governments to do what it cannot for now. And that is to essentially erode private property rights through faux renter concern that they justify by keeping the country in a constant state of panic and fear. How very convenient to the slyly promoted Blackstonian ideal of not owning property. Make a nation of renters. Employ the Marxist stereotype of the evil landlord to aid your cause. So now we're in a pickle. Put people on the street or put people on the dole. Both are terrible ideas, and both outcomes are the result of this hyperactive nanny state government that never met a problem in the economy it didn't want to make worse. Now, of course, all of this caused the DC circus to unleash the clown show. First, for a brief moment, we thought AOC made some sense when she said this. It's not that it's not the fault of the GOP. I know, hold on to something like a table. Watch.
Who's to blame here?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues here. First of all, you are absolutely correct in that the House and House leadership had the opportunity to vote to extend the moratorium. And there were many, and there was frankly a handful of conservative Democrats in the House that threatened to get on planes rather than hold this vote. And we have to really just call a spade a spade. We cannot, in good faith, blame the Republican Party when House Democrats have a majority.
By the way, I thought that little colloquialism that she just said there was a racist remark. Isn't that what we were told, like, for 2 years now? Anyway, I digress. Now Democrats don't like other Democrats getting on planes. But it really actually wasn't about anything with conservative Democrats. Back to reality. Here's the giddy AOC who says she was up all night working on extending the eviction moratorium. Now, luckily, she could cruise over to the Capitol steps in her super expensive Tesla on autopilot, of course. So here she is, unaware of the irony, with an $8 Starbucks in hand and a Patagonia parka, saying that the Biden administration should ignore the law and just extend the moratorium. Watch.
So really, I think this is coming down to political will. Is the administration willing to challenge it, or are we going to roll over and allow 1 in 6 renters in this country to be at risk of eviction? Doesn't sound like a good idea to me, as well as a systemic risk, as well as catastrophic, materially, economically, politically, just all of it, emotionally, mentally. We can't be allowing for this.
Okay, so question, why is it that the responsibility of making up for the government's mistake goes to property owners as opposed to the government who shut down the economy that prevented people from engaging in commerce and being able to make their rent bill? Not to be outdone, Cori Bush put on a performance that would make AOC envious. Who's the bigger drama queen? It's even better than AOC's crying about cages. That whole performance at the border, that was only when Trump was president. Those tears are only reserved for a Democrat in the White House, or a Republican rather. When all the world is a stage, though, the social media performances, they never stop. So here it is, Cori Bush, who will certainly be up for best performance, I guess, at Cannes Film Festival. She laid on the Capitol steps pretending to be homeless. That's homeless appropriation. You're going to have some bums in Austin go, my culture is not your costume. You see, Cori Bush cares, as does the Democrat Party. They care so much that they're willing to create a permanent underclass with their policies while causing labor shortages and inflation and making it to where no one can afford basic items. See, when you're a Democrat and you can just say that you care, you don't ever actually have to apologize or do math. I mean, after all, you did all the damaging things you did with your policies because you have such a big heart and an inability to follow logic through to its eventual consequence. So the cycle continues. Government gets involved with the economy when it shouldn't, and then causes completely predictable consequences, and then purposefully grows the dependent class, shrinks the middle class, U.S. debt expands, politicians get more powerful. Remember, the hand that feeds you and pays your bills, that's the hand that controls you. It makes the rules. Democrats know this. That's why they interfere in the economy and mandate that things be made free. And by free, it's at everyone else's expense. Just elect them and we can all keep the free checks coming, right? The only thing that it will cost us, the American way of life, ambition, freedom, self-accountability. I mean, we're running a debt load of nearly $30 trillion. We're basically bankrupt. And that bill, you just talk about how great of a parent you are while you leave that kind of bill to your kids. We've borrowed from their futures to live high on the hog today. So it's time to stop the printing presses. It's time to stop handing out free money. These debts have to be paid. It's time to get back to work. Less protesting and more productivity. And instead of more eviction moratoriums, how about a moratorium on government interventions in the economy? How about a moratorium on the IRS or complete abolishment of the IRS? How about moving everyone from the thievery of income taxation? We actually move to a graduated consumption tax, right? One that actually makes sense. As Reagan has said, quote, in this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. Amen. Coming up, medical schools are now denying biological sex, yet they want you to follow the science. What science? Whose science? I mean, we know what boys and girls are, right? Jeff Charles joins us after this to discuss. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to premium people who premiumly love premium America. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and as a CIA contractor. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to Evan's mission of supporting veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. So summer's almost over. Black Rifle Coffee Company invites you to enjoy whatever of your summer is left with your coffee. Just brew the perfect cup of pour over or get a can of 300 for when you get ready to do carpooling for school, because you're going to need it. Black Rifle Coffee is here to fuel your way wherever the end of summer takes you. So visit blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV to order yours and use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel the rest of your summer with America's coffee, Black Rifle Coffee. So when medicine goes woke, bad things can happen, like not understanding basic biological reality. You know, the difference between, say, boys and girls. Sadly, this is actually happening. Jeff Charles is a contributor for RedState.com, Liberty Nation, and the host of A Fresh Perspective podcast. Jeff joins us now. Jeff, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on this. Whatever happened to following the data and following the science and the whole, scientific process? That seems to now all have been junked for whatever this woke political correctness make-believe stuff is. Talk to us about this. I know you've discussed this issue quite a bit, but what are you learning about the wokery in terms of practicing medicine now?
Yeah, what I'm learning is that the one rule that you need to follow is that woke virtue signaling trumps facts and data. So, and it's created an environment where, frankly, a lot of medical professionals and medical professors are even afraid to refer to somebody by their original sex or use the wrong terminology. So essentially the authoritarian Marxist approach is infiltrating the world of medicine, just kind of like we're seeing in the military, in the classrooms, and in other institutions. They're trying to inject this stuff everywhere that they can, and they're doing it largely under our noses.
Yeah, I was reading an article just the other day that was discussing, this was a physician at Harvard. She was a professor, and she was promoting a book where she was talking about these biological issues. And then the head of the person who is the officer of diversity and inclusion and all the other CRT language, that officer there, that person, they took issue with this professor, this Harvard professor, using the term pregnant women. And then I guess decided to try to incite a rage mob on Twitter to go after this professor. When did that phrase, pregnant women, become when did that become such a trigger, Jeffrey? This is crazy.
I want to blame it on Representative Cori Bush when she came out and talked about birthing person and birthing people. But this stuff is going on long before she said that. It's where she got it from. And this is essentially the left trying to enforce their language, their nomenclature on everybody else. It's not simply a matter where they believe that things should be said one way and then you can have that debate. No, that they want to shut down and punish anybody who doesn't acquiesce to the way they want things said. So what happened to this Harvard professor, that's happened to multiple professors that I've been reading about. It's horrible.
Yeah. This another piece that I had been looking at. where in medical school there are young doctors apparently taught to declare their pronouns before meeting patients, and the NIH, the CDC, and the Harvard Medical School have all made efforts to separate sex from essentially the practice of medicine, and they are really focusing on gender identity. I just think, Jeff, there was a story where a transgender man, a woman who identifies as a man, walked into a hospital. I shared this just earlier, actually just yesterday on my radio program. Went to the hospital, had some cramps. Turned out that this individual was with child, but because of the way that we are now, I guess, that medical professionals are directed to approach medicine with this emphasis on gender identity. I mean, that's not something that you can immediately ask a person. Doesn't that actually add time on to addressing serious health issues with people? I just feel like we're going to get to a point where that's actually going to impede the ability of doctors to get in and actually save lives when seconds count.
It does. It's making things a lot more complex, a lot more complicated. It's making it harder for medical professionals to navigate this whole world because they say the wrong thing, they'll get punished. And keep in mind, in this story, a baby died because of this. So this is a serious matter. I'm not saying that this would happen in every single case, but the fact remains, if you're adding on more elements that will make things more complicated, make it harder for medical professionals to heal, then it's probably not worth doing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Talking to Jeff Charles at Red State, I know that activists have targeted not just physicians, but going after professors, going after J.K. Rowling and anyone else who just simply acknowledges just the basic science and basic. I mean, do we recognize chromosomes now or not? Is that something that we just throw those out the window?
No, I think we're just going to find another letter. Every chromosome is like a Z chromosome. I think that's where we're moving towards. But yeah, I mean, they tried to cancel J.K. Rowling. I mean, she wrote Harry Potter. You can't cancel that person. That's obscene. But all she was pointing out is the fact that this is affecting women. I mean, these people claim to be feminists. They claim to stand up for the rights of women. And she was only discussing how this phenomenon she wasn't bashing transgenders, but she was explaining how this is hurting actual women. I mean, you look at sports in the Olympics, you see biological men competing with biological women and not batting an eye and acting like this is somehow normal, like we're just supposed to sit by and let them gaslight us. I mean, I don't know how much longer this can go before there's a huge backlash to it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And Jeff, one of the big topics that everybody's been talking about is trust in the agencies. Like right now with this pandemic and vaccine rollout, and people have questions for the CDC and these medical professionals that are talking about all this stuff. It doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence in any of these agencies or in what they're telling us when you have, the American Medical Association saying we need to remove the gender identity from birth certificates and we're going to treat everyone the same. I just know that if I'm going into and filling out, anytime anybody goes to a medical professional, they fill out the form. And if I'm seeing wokery on the application, like how do you identify, I'm immediately going to question the reality in which this medical professional is operating. Like I'm just going to think if they're not operating in basic facts, I'm worried about my care and placing myself in these people's hands. Surely you and I cannot be the only people thinking this.
No, I think most Americans, and I would even say a lot of Americans, even who may vote Democrat, are disturbed by this. Like this is not mainstream. I mean, this is more fringe elements, but these far left progressives have a hold on all of our communication institutions. So I would think that normal people would be hesitant. They probably wouldn't go to a doctor in that case, although they wouldn't say publicly why, because they know what will happen. But it is. I mean, anything that could make something more complicated. I mean, this is healthcare we're talking about. We're not talking about a game or a sport. We're talking about whether you live or die. You want to know that the person that's going to be taking care of you has their heads screwed on straight.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And you and I, man and woman, we have different medical issues. We have different medical realities. And it seems so weird to even have to walk down that road to explain that to anybody, right? I mean, people would understand that men and women are two very different beings that have very different biological needs, that have very different things that medical professionals will have to address at some point in our lives. So are we forfeiting the acknowledgement of that reality because of this? And what does that say about medicine and the practice of medicine in the future? It kind of feels like an idiocracy kind of style medicine or healthcare system.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and I don't think that the average person is giving it up, but I do think that's where they want us to go. And honestly, Dana, the issue is that everybody knows that we're being gaslit. Everybody knows that the emperor has no clothes on. It is for that reason why they enforce their nomenclature so strictly. They know that they can't persuade people to think that men and women are the exact same, and that's even biological sex now is a social construct. So what they have to do is punish you for saying anything different. So what they want to do, and even in that story at the school, I mean, there were students who were bullying the professors into using the correct terms. And what they want is a system where people self-censor so they don't have to actually worry about having any type of pushback.
Yeah, it's a great point. I know you've focused and have talked about authors like Abigail Schreier and people who have just simply commented on the science and the basic fact of these issues. One of the big topics that I really do worry about as it relates to this is, for instance, with these young kids that are going in and talking to, like one of the professors, and I think one of the articles that you cite here had written a paper that was discussing the issue of the number of kids who are identifying or saying that they have gender dysphoria. And this medical professional, this professor who has a background in medicine, wrote a book about it, and ended up getting, the rage mob came for her. But no one, and while they were all going after this adult medical professional who's speaking from a trained background, no one's talking about what we're doing to very young kids who have not yet gone through puberty, who are being just prescribed hormones. And I don't even think, do we actually even really know what the long-term effects of hormonal usage is going to be? No one's talking about that. And that scares me. Jeff, where do you think that we're going to be with kids like 15, 20 years from now? Because we've had this explosion of gender dysphoria and all of these hormone prescriptions. What is that? Where's it going to lead us?
It depends on who wins the argument, Dana. I mean, conservatives have to get out there and repudiate this stuff. If we don't, if the left does win, then we are going to have more of this. And keep in mind that the one that you just talked about, the book, talked about how, girls were identifying more as transgender, and it seemed like it was more socially influenced. And like you said, they came down on her. They made her make a few cosmetic changes. But here's the thing. They didn't say she was wrong. So they knew that they even said what she said was factual. So they said, yeah, what you're saying is factual, but we don't want you to say it. And if you do, we're going to hurt you. We're going to hurt your career. So yeah, we have to win this argument, because if not, the consequences are not anything that we probably want to think about.
Gosh, I just feel that we're in this weird Orwellian world where now it's, out of all of the things that it should not affect, medicine, you would think, but no, here we are politicizing even that. Jeff Charles, appreciate your work over at Red State. Thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. All right, folks, Republicans should revolt against Nancy Pelosi, says my friend Kurt Schlichter. He's got a new book out, and he also joins me next to break all of that down. Keep it here. Should the GOP simply revolt at this point? My next guest says yes. Kurt Schlichter, senior columnist for Town Hall and author of the new book. It's the 6th in the Kelly Turnbull series, The Split, which seems like kind of almost where we are at now. It's out now. Go get it. It's awesome. Kurt, welcome. Good to see you, as always.
Hi, Dana. It's coming to you from my garage to avoid the barking dog and the gardener and his leaf blower. So welcome to this.
God bless America, because that's capitalism in action outside. Never apologize for that.
Hey, dude's got to make some money. Dog's got to do what the dog's got to do, and the Republicans got to fail. Everything's all back to normal.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on this. Does it feel to you like there's a small group of Republicans that are doing the heavy lifting for the entire party on all of these huge issues the past several years?
That's true. There are more of them than they were. Look, we're making progress. We're getting rid of the Jeff Flakes and many of the rest of them. But there's still a lot of get along Republicans who don't want to take a hard stand, who don't want to tell Nancy Pelosi to take her face diapers and wrap them around her own pie hole. I mean, look, we're Republicans. We're used to being failed by our leadership. We are the abused wives of American politics. Our husband always comes home with liberal lipstick on his collar and smelling a Chanel No. 5.
That's true. And it would be the Chanel No. 5, which that would be probably what Nancy Pelosi would wear, I would imagine, if she ever divulged that.
It's the only
But no, I mean,
perfume
it is. No, but I mean, you bring up something a very good point, because, like, for instance, like with the last, and we had just heard from President Biden at his press conference a little bit ago, like with the lockdowns and the mask mandates, there were a number of Republican lawmakers and governors and some just different state reps that actually, some of them went along with this. Now none of them are going along with it. So have they read the writing on the wall? Did we get mad enough at them last time that they're not going to do it again?
Well, most of them do, but Dana, some of them just have this instinct towards submission. You know, you had Asa, ! Hutchinson. He decides he wants to change it, so now he can impose mask mandates because, well, the New York Times wants him to. And of course, Kristi Noem's, hitting the speed dial to the Chamber of Commerce to find out what they want her to do. But we've got some heroes like Ron DeSantis, and Greg
I was
Abbott.
like, Rick is his brother.
Yeah.
It'd be great if there was another one. Clone him.
Them, and they're kind of going their own way. You could see Biden was trying to take a hit at him in his own doddering, slobbering way today. The guys in Texas and Florida, they've got to get out of the way. And of course, Cuomo's up there. He's killed 10,000 old people, and they're really upset because some Democrat women hung around him and found they acted exactly like Democrat males always act, and yet they're shocked. So it's, the whole thing's ridiculous. I was just in your own state of Texas last weekend. I didn't wear a mouth thong. I was free. People were carrying guns. It was like America. And now I'm back in this hellhole, Los Angeles, and you got stupid people walking outside with their 5-year-olds in masks in the sunlight. It's ridiculous.
Their face thong. I'm never, ever going to get that image out of my head. That's a courtesy of Kurt Schlichter, face thong. Oh, my gosh.
I try and make
I thought Texas felt sassier I thought it felt a little sassier last week, I had to say, because you were in the Republic of Texas, yeah. So the big infrastructure bill, I know that because this is ultimately what you're kind of getting into. I saw that we're spending. What is up? Sidebar to this. What is up with the left and trains and spending money on trains? That's like the thing that we always come back to.
I don't know what this weird thing is about getting them. Maybe it's they want to get us out of cars because, like guns, an automobile is a symbol of a free citizen as opposed to a serf who's got to wait patiently till some government-sponsored bus pulls up and at the time and manner of the government's own choosing will take you where the government thinks you need to go. But there's even more in there. My favorite's the breathalyzer mandate. Apparently they want to make sure that every car is equipped with a breathalyzer in 3 years. What?
Yeah, I saw that on all new vehicles.
I mean, there's Uber. Oh, wait. They want to get rid of that, too, because people are able to make money without government approval and without being in a union. It's all one and the same. It's all about control, and we need to reject it. We shouldn't vote for the little infrastructure bill, and we shouldn't allow the big infrastructure bill to pass either. It's all packed full of garbage, including the trains to nowhere. I don't know. Trains are the cutting edge technology of the 19th century. Why are we doing this again?
It feels very old-timey, doesn't it? It feels super old-timey.
Yeah, but not like cool old-timey with handlebar mustaches, really big pipes, and those kind of triangular weights. I mean, that's cool old-timey. This is like squalor old-timey.
It is.
Old-timey.
Nobody has antibiotics. We don't have any penicillin. China has it all. No, but to this point, because there were a lot of Republicans, and I know I always hear the excuse from a lot of people that I know who work for some of these different elected officials, these representatives. They say, well, we don't have the majority in the House. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a mouth or a voice and you can't fight. I think, what was it, $250 million spent on removing invasive plant species because that's apparently infrastructure. I mean, I don't see all of these people vociferously protesting this stuff.
Well, look, I mean, I'm all for getting rid of invasive plants. I'm more for getting rid of invasive illegal aliens, many of whom are swimming with disease. And while I do have some sympathy for people who are coughing a lung out, swim over a river and climb through a desert in order to try and get a minimum wage job, this is our country and they shouldn't be coming in without our permission. But that's no big deal. No, the real problem is Ron DeSantis isn't making people wrap a hijab around their mouth and walk around like they look like they're about to knock over a bank.
It's true. Mouth thong, face hijab, mouth hijab. I'm making a list of all. I'm going to see how many of these names. I love it. How many of these names we can get through it. My friend Kurt Schlichter, whose new book, The Split, is out, which is kind of where it seems really things are going, because it does seem as though we're kind of being stoked to have this vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. New York came out with a thing today. You can't go, and I have been waiting all day to just say this quote to you, just so I could get your perspective on it. Bill de Blasio, His Honor, Mayor of New York City, he said that you can't come and be a part of our society and our culture up here if you're not getting vaccinated. I just wanted to know what Kurt Schlichter thought about that. You can't be part of their society up there if you can't go get vaccinated, Kurt.
Traditionally, Dana, a threat is to take something away that I might want. I don't want to be any part of that petri dish that Manhattan has become any more than I want to be part of Los Angeles, which is just a few miles away. Look, if they're saying you can't come to our city without a mask, all I can say is, okay, you got it. No thanks. I do find it interesting, though. They haven't thought this through. What about kids? Kids under 12 can't get the vaccine. May no kid go out to dinner anymore? And I don't want to point out a really uncomfortable fact, but while there are lots of conservatives who don't trust the government and our establishment enough to get a vaccine, which is entirely the government and establishment's fault, by the way, there are also huge numbers of minority Americans who don't. And if you've heard of the Tuskegee experiment, you're probably thinking, yeah, and they got a good reason not to. I'm the government. I'm here. I'm here from the public health system, and I'm here to help you. No thanks. Get back. They're going to end up having a lot of black and brown people being kicked out of the important institutions of society, and but that's okay if they can stick it to those Trump people who don't believe in science and like Jesus and guns. It's all posturing. It's all ridiculous. It has nothing to do with science. It's stupid. And I say we should just refuse to be any part of it.
Yeah, I'm not looking. I have no problem in doing that. I mean, it's not going to stop any. It's not going to stop any of anybody urinating on the subway platforms. It's not going to stop anybody from playing the knockout games with the Asian people out in the streets, because we see those videos like almost every week now at this point. But you make a really good point, because I think that's why you could never have a vaccine mandate from this administration, because what would that do to minority communities who historically have good reasons to not trust the federal government?
Well, exactly, Dana. Now, look, let's do a little thought experiment. I wrote about it in Town Hall a little while ago. What if they hadn't lied to us for 18 months? What if at the beginning they had said, no one should wear a mask, it's a bad idea, and then they decided, yeah, we should wear masks, and they came out and said, guys, we were totally wrong. Here's the science. These are the facts. We didn't know. Now we're changing our mind, and here's why, and you can go online and read the actual studies, and we want to change our mind. And people would go, well, we haven't had a pandemic in about 100 years. People are going to make mistakes, but they're being honest and transparent. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they hadn't lied to us and tried to shame us and told us every time we asked questions, we were denying the science, where in fact asking questions is exactly what science is. Right now, people might be listening to them and taking it into account. But now the level of distrust is so high and so justified. Look, I made my own choice about the vaccine. I don't ask anybody else to make any particular choice. But I certainly can't tell somebody who says, look, I just don't trust them, that they should, because our establishment has completely defaulted on any kind of right to trust. It's blown it, it's lied to us, it's changed its story, and more importantly, because things change. Hey, butter's bad for you. No, it's good for you. You've got to be humble about it. You have to say, guys, we were wrong. We did more tests. Here's the study. And we were wrong at the beginning. And here's why we were wrong. And here's what we learned from it. And then you go, oh, okay. All right. Well, nobody's perfect. You're trying. You're honest with me. When you screwed up, you told me. But there's never any humility. It's always, you're an idiot for listening to what I said last week and not understanding that yesterday the narrative changed. Maybe you're not on the memo distribution list for talking points to the liberal establishment. But it is entirely the establishment's fault that people are not taking the vaccine because they blew the trust. They screwed it up.
Yeah.
They set on fire and stomped on it.
There you go. They absolutely did. I can't wait to do that with the face thongs, by the way. Set them on fire and stomp on them. I can't wait.
Yes.
I'm just waiting for that day. Last quick
so-
question for you. Your book, The Split, tell us about it because it's out. People can go order it. And it's very, very, like I said, it's very kind of where we're at. Just saying.
It really is. It's a sixth book in the series. America splits into red and blue countries, and the hero goes into the blue country, and it's like a giant college campus times California times 1,000. And there's lots of shooting, gun stuff, and making fun of liberals. And people love these books, Dana. I mean, this thing was selling like I got it as low as 42. I actually think I got lower out of all of Amazon. I mean, that's incredible.
That's awesome.
That human sausage Vindman, who's got every liberal on earth buying his stupid book and who's on every Sunday show, he only got 40 slots ahead of me. I mean, it's amazing. People are dying for the conservative kind of entertainment that Andrew Breitbart warned us we needed. The Split and the other 5 books starting with People's Republic. They're a lot of fun. People love them. Look at the reviews. Go out and get it. Let's have our own art. I'm sick of woke press. If you want unwoke, if you want insomnia, that's my book. It is conservative caffeine.
I love it. And you're a good storyteller, too.
Deprived in a woke world.
Yes, and you're a very good storyteller as well, right on top of it. It's a good book. People need to go out and get it and start at the beginning and read up until the 6th book, The Split, the Kelly Turnbull series. Kurt Schlichter, always good to see you, my friend. Appreciate your stuff over at Town Hall. I know we'll be talking again soon. Good to see you.
Thanks, Dana. Bye-bye.
Of course. Bye. All right, folks, princess culture. It's under fire again, but not for the reason you might think. More on this next. In the continuing effort to emasculate America's men, a new study from Brigham Young University came out, and the headline is, BYU study finds that princess culture can heal toxic masculinity. From the article, quote, boys who are exposed to princess culture earlier in life tend to do a better job expressing emotion in their relationships. Rather than shutting down their feelings or feeling like they should fight someone who challenges them, they can express their emotions in nonviolent ways, end quote. That's from BYU. Like, hi, right? That's the Mormon Church's university, right? Brigham Young University. BYU is where that's clearly, I mean, it's their study. And they're clearly dealing with a serious case of the wokes, apparently. I'm not sure where in any teaching or Mormon teaching or regardless, bringing up little boys by immersing them in princess culture is taught. Not quite sure. That has nothing to do with toxic masculinity is a fake thing. And why is BYU drinking the woke-flavored Kool-Aid, buying into this stuff? Imagine if BYU produced an article about toxic femininity. All of you toxic femininity people with your lifestyle blogs that they're all white and pastels. Really, you know what I'm talking about. If you said toxic femininity, you'd probably lose your funding as a researcher. After all, woke feminism can never criticize women, except if they're conservative. But it's totally happy to tear down men because it loves them, right? But still, BYU had affirmed that idea of toxic masculinity, which itself is toxic and sexist. And toxic masculinity, honestly, that's something that weak people use to describe traits like strength and leadership and toughness, things that men should have, which our emasculated society has decided that it no longer values. No, instead, we want a society to raise something like what? Boys who I don't care if a dude likes princesses, but quit saying that if a dude doesn't, that it's toxic masculinity. Or if a dude is chivalrous, it's toxic masculinity. That's a problem of ignorance, of people not understanding what chivalry is all about. First of all, feminists hate princess culture. They think that princess culture stereotypes girls as loving pastel colors and pretty dresses and being attracted to one of those gosh darn toxic masculine Disney princesses. But impose that stereotype, that princess culture on little boys. Okay, see, now you're talking. Girls acting like girls is bad, but boys acting like girls and getting into princess culture like Gonzarella from the other day, that's apparently awesome. More of that, say, activists in BYU apparently. I mean, if you're gonna go that route, really, what are you doing at BYU? And maybe parents who are sending their kids to BYU, maybe take a look at what they're doing. I mean, I'm a boy mom, right? I didn't raise my kids to be emasculated, and I also didn't raise my kids to listen to any nonsense about toxic masculinity, right? I don't know, maybe Mormonism, like a lot of the evangelical church, is fighting with wokeism. There's another observation for you. Question for heterosexual women. And I know the answer, this is rhetorical. Do you get fired up when you meet dudes who are super into princess culture, or do you get fired up about dudes who are maybe independent, strong, opinionated, maybe even a little unbridled? What lights your fire? I mean, there are studies on this, and I know the answer. I'm just saying. The whole idea to call men toxic, you realize that it's toxic masculinity that saved everybody's butts in World War I and World War II, and it was toxic masculinity that also has intervened in almost every single conflict. It's toxic masculinity that has, for crying out loud, helped create this country. This is just leftist ideologues that are taking over academic institutions, and now apparently even BYU. And while you can change the ideology around gender, you can't change human nature. Girls are going to be girls and boys are going to be boys. And if some girls like some things boys like and some boys like some things girls like, that doesn't mean the boy is going to be a girl, the girls are going to be a boy. This isn't a Blur song, okay? And if BYU doesn't like it, and if you don't like what your kids are being taught there, take it up with a higher power. But I still reject the idea of toxic masculinity. That phrase, few things make me angrier than tossing that phrase up as any kind of legitimate form of argument, expression, or science. So that does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night and don't bend the knee.